Hey guys, this is Coach Wilson. Hope you're having a good day. Going to get started pretty quickly today, get through day 11, and we'll keep rolling. Also wanted to let you know, make sure you guys are listening to the lectures. Okay, those of you that have been listening, thank you. I can see whether you are watching the lectures or not. It actually tells me. So please make sure you're actually doing those. Quite a few of you are just going and getting the notes. Answer the questions, guys. You need to hear some of my explanation because it's going to be tough to get some of the answers for the test if you're not doing that. Okay. All right, sorry about that. I had to pause for a second and take a phone call. So we're going to go ahead and start your notes for the day on the Industrial Revolution. Okay, make sure you got your journal done. This is Unit 4, Day 11. Okay, here's your questions for today. What was the effects of the Industrial Revolution on sectionalism? Okay, we haven't talked about that in a while, but it's still going on. Then how did the Industrial Revolution make life in America much easier? Now, the economies of the 1800s was focused on a couple things. Number one, for a long time, farmers had been focused on specialization. All right, and this is, they had been focused on subsistence farming. Now they're going to go to specialized farming where they're going to essentially grow one or two cash crops, and they can sell those bigger crops somewhere overseas or somewhere to make money. That's going to start to change how our society approaches living. Instead of growing everything you need, making everything you need at home, now you're going to start going somewhere else and purchasing those things. That creates the market revolution, as where people bought and sold goods rather than making them for their own use. All right, so now you're going to start to see capitalism develop. Okay, and that's just our economic system. Essentially, private businesses or private entities own the means of production, so they make it and they use those things to earn a profit. That's our current economic system. Socialism, for example, is the government owns those things. But in capitalism, basically, we have private owners of industry. Okay? Now, the Industrial Revolution is going to spark out of this time of capitalism and this market revolution. You're going to see new inventions, but the Industrial Revolution, to put it simply, is a period of time in which led to the creation of new inventions. All right, and here's just a list. You can pause there if you want to look at some of those. We're getting ready to talk about most of those. Now, Robert Fulton was the inventor of the steamboat engine. Okay, the first ship that he helped to put his engine on was called the Clermont. It was able to sail 150 miles in 32 hours. Now, that may not seem like a quick trip for you guys, but to be honest with you, that is moving in those times. Especially when you think about how long it takes you to walk a mile. Think about you could get on a boat and you could travel, you could essentially travel 150 miles in a day and a half. You could be wherever you wanted to be, you know, a state over or wherever it may be. Now, most of these boats are going to be on the Mississippi and in the canals, and that's where it's really going to find its niche, is in these canals where they can transport various things using steam rather than having to use any kind of like manpower or paddle power, or even having to use the another choice. Now, the steam engine is also going to cause the development of the steam engine train. We'll talk about that here in just a second. Here's a picture of the Clermont 1807. Gives you an idea of kind of what's going on. And then if you want to pull up the PowerPoint, you can watch that video. We're not going to watch it here because I'm going to put that on your own time. That kind of explains how a steam engine works, etc. Now, the train and the steamboat are going to compete, but the Iron Horse, as it was called in the early 1820s, develops as a result of the steam engine. By 1830, there was about 200 steamboats, and by 1855, about 3,300 miles of canal. So the boats and canals are going to really expand during this 50-year period between 1812 and the 1860s. The Iron Horse could carry heavy loads. As it starts to develop, it's going to make it much easier to transport across land. It's going to cause the expansion of railroads, and Western expansion kind of booms as a result of this. So all this land that we kind of acquired over the last 30 years, still haven't got to the rest of the country yet, but all this land we've acquired in the Louisiana Purchase and then the Adams-Onis Treaty, now the train's going to allow us to expand. Problem is, the train, when it first developed, had no brakes. That's a problem. Very hot embers from the burning the coal and the wood, and then poor signal system. It could not stop at the depots. Okay, so there's no way for them to have like an actual depot where like they had to slow down way in advance. Like they had to basically like pull the speed down and try to start slowing the train down. Just a lot of things you don't think about, like that we think about because we're used to vehicles, but they had never had a motorized vehicle at that time. Now, another invention during this time is the first steel plow invented by John Deere. Made it much easier to plow heavy soil. They could use horses instead of oxen, so the steel plow went through the ground easier. You also see Cyrus McCormick and his mechanical reaper. Essentially, it's a big spinning like blade, and it's pulled by a horse, and it spins, and it puts the It basically slices the wheat or whatever crop you're trying to slice down to where you can harvest it much quicker. Specifically, corn and wheat was used for this invention. But John Deere's invention and then McCormick's invention are going to make farming much easier, especially in the Midwest where it's a very dry climate. Okay? We're going to skip that video as well. Make sure you guys are watching these. I'm just trying to get through this quickly today. I want to make sure you guys had plenty of time to work and that you could listen to the lecture. Now, Charles Goodyear is going to invent vulcanized rubber, and I'm going to take a second to read this because it's kind of interesting. He is who Goodyear Tires is named after because he invented vulcanized rubber. Okay, but the funny thing about rubber is that he thought that it was going to like revolutionize the entire world, in the point that he wanted to make banknotes, musical instruments, flags, jewelry, ship sails, even ships themselves out of rubber. Had his portrait painted on rubber, his calling cards were engraved on it, autobiography printed on it, and he even wore rubber hats, vests, and ties. He was committed to rubber. Interesting dude, but regardless, kind of a neat thing there. Elias Howe and I.M. Singer both invented the sewing machine and the foot treadle, originally used for shoes, but the foot pedal allowed for cheaper production of clothing, and clothing is going to become much cheaper and more available. So essentially what Howe and Singer were able to do is that one made the sewing machine, and one makes this foot pedal that basically runs the machine instead of you having to crank it. And because of that, it made it much easier to sell clothing, to have more than just one or two sets of clothes that you wore and you had to wash them all the time. It really is going to develop a new market in clothing that as we get further along in time and we start to develop more cotton and more of these textile factories, you're starting to see more and more things kind of grow into this market revolution that we've been talking about. Okay, here's Elias Howe. Okay, and then here's the first sewing machine. Okay, and you can look up the foot treadle if you really would like to. Samuel Morse and Joseph Henry both were instrumental in inventing the telegraph in 1837. Morse was actually, he was credited with it, and we'll talk about that in a second, but Joseph Henry was the original inventor. The telegraph basically just carries messages tapped in code across copper wire. If you guys have ever seen the machine down there in the bottom left where they're tapping it and it's got different dots and dashes, that is essentially Morse code as it comes to be known, but that was how they communicated. The big thing here is that by 1847, it actually connected all of the major cities where they could transmit orders, they could relay information on the prices and sales of like different department stores. Railroads used these to keep up with possible hazards, and eventually they're going to do it to keep up with the schedule for the train so that people know whether it's on time or would be there late, etc. But just kind of a very neat invention. It's kind of like the first step towards the telephone, if you want to put it that way. Okay, here is the telegraph key. Okay, then here are the actual codes for typing in Morse code. You can actually download an app on your phone if you ever want to play with it. Kind of a neat little thing to mess with there. Here's your vocabulary words for the day. Make sure you get all three of these. I know I went through that in like a house of fire, but I wanted to try to keep notes as short as possible today. And then don't worry about this right here. I will actually put your assignment up on Canvas. We may end up doing the marketing scheme when I'm recording this. I haven't decided exactly what I want to do with you just yet, but I will let you know for sure as soon as I get to that point. Okay? And then these are just some examples, but don't worry about that. I will put up on Canvas your assignment. Otherwise, you're done. Make sure you get your vocabulary. Make sure you go answer those 3 questions at the very beginning. All right? If you need anything, guys, please let me know, and hope you're having a great week. Talk to you soon.